Hey everyone, Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We've got Nick Farabaugh in from PennLive.com. And we got to talk about Cam Heyward's comments as he talked about the Aaron Rodgers situation as well as a few other things. We'll address Cam's comments and whether they reflect on the team, quarterbacks worth a shot in the NFL draft, and DB communication. Will it improve this year? All here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $20 off your first purchase. More information on them later. Before I start the show, I do want to give a special shout out to the best dad ever. Happy birthday to Pops. Pops, if you listen to the show, you're watching the show, what are you doing? You're supposed to be celebrating in the morning. You're at Pamela's having a good time. Either way, shout out to my dad, Leonard Carter. He's the best dad, Coach C, for a lot of people that knew him over the years. Anyways, let's get to our guest here, Nick Farabaugh. He's from Penn Live. You know we love having Nick on. Nick, how you doing?
I'm doing well, man, and happy to Mr. Carter. Happy birthday to Mr. Carter.
Woo.
Celebrate. That is great to hear, man.
Yeah, man. He's living up retirement life, doing his thing. But Nick, I want to talk to you about the big thing that happened on a different podcast yesterday, and that was our guy Cam Heyward, Steelers All-Pro defensive tackle. He had some interesting words. Now, I'm going to put this disclaimer before we start talking about this. I think that some people, the way it was portrayed by media that first jumped on it, they tried to portray it in a more dramatic way that it happened. So bear with me. But Cam Heyward talking about it, this quote lit up some headlines when he was talking about it. He said, quote, "I ain't doing that darkness retreat. I don't need any of that crap. Either you want to be a Pittsburgh Steeler or you don't. That's simple. That's the pitch. If you want to be part of it, so be it. If you don't, no skin off my back." And that quote went out and exploded in the morning on Tuesday, and everyone was talking about it, Nick, and it was like, whoa. And so I was like, well, let me at least see what that actually was. And I wrote about this for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, but specifically, Cam Heyward was simply he's simply responding to a question: would he go on a darkness retreat? A joking question by his co-host. Would he go on a darkness retreat to recruit Aaron Rodgers? And he was like, no. And he's like, but he also said shortly after that statement, he said, everyone's entitled to their opinion. You can take however long. When you start putting teams against each other, I don't get into things like that. He's like, that's not my business. I will never tell a man what to do or how to do it. But if you want to be part of the group, be part of the group. So his point all along, Nick, was, I'm just, is like, I'm not going all the way out on my way. If this guy wants to be a Steeler, he'll be a Steeler. If he doesn't, we'll move on and we'll find fun. He also expressed some confidence in Mason Rudolph potentially being the guy if he had to be. But Nick, what was your take or what was your reaction to how Cam Heyward addressed this Aaron Rodgers situation?
I mean, I don't know. I think it's probably being made out to more than what it is. I think there's a lot of people that are like triumphantly parading this as finally someone speaks up and tells Aaron Rodgers to do this, and not really what it is. It's not sensational, right? It's not like he went right at Aaron Rodgers unprompted and said, listen up, I need to give you a piece of my mind. All he said is he's not going to go to the other side of the country to go recruit this guy to become a Steeler. Exactly. He didn't do it with Russell Wilson either. He was on FaceTime for 2 hours. I mean,
yeah, they talked on the phone. Like, that's right. I'm sure he'll do that for Aaron Rodgers.
Right. I'm sure that he'll do that. And I think his whole thing is, listen, the Pittsburgh Steelers are a brand. They're a historical organization. You don't need me to do a lot of selling, right? It's kind of the thing. Like, the Steelers sell a lot of their free agency thing on, look at who we are. We are the Pittsburgh Steelers. Mike Tomlin's here. We have a tradition, et cetera, et cetera. If you don't think Aaron Rodgers knows the tradition of the Pittsburgh Steelers and Mike Tomlin,
yeah,
I think you are on a darkness retreat. Like that's honestly what I'm feeling. It's so, like, I don't know, this Cam stuff, I'm sure there's a little bit of a sentiment there from probably a little bit of everybody that, is like, come on, Rodgers decide, et cetera, et cetera. But here's two things I'll point to everybody that's a little impatient about the Aaron Rodgers stuff. One, both the Giants and Steelers seem perfectly content perfectly
Yeah.
content to let him take time.
Mhm.
2, he is probably deciding not only between the Steelers, Giants, and maybe Vikings, he's deciding between does he want to continue his career. Like, let's understand this. That is a big thing to decide. Like, for a guy like Aaron Rodgers, he's been playing this game, I'm assuming, since he's probably been playing this for 30 years, this game for over 30 years at this point. And when you are done with football, when you're done with the NFL, that's it. Like, it's not like, Jay Glazer made this point, and I thought it was pretty good. It's not like, basketball where, okay, you retire from the NBA, but you can still go get runs in with your guys, or baseball, you still play catch or pick up a bat and can go play. With football, man, if you're done, you're done. Like, it's really done. You're not really going out, to the concrete and playing two-hand touch and all of that. There's a finality to an NFL career. So I understand the kind of sitting on your hands thing and people worrying about what Aaron Rodgers is doing, but he's got a big decision to make. The team seem content with it. And more importantly, no other quarterback right now is making a decision without Aaron Rodgers making a decision. Russell Wilson's waiting. It seems like the other options are waiting. And so right now there's no need for him to rush.
No, I'm right. I'm right with you on this. It's not it's everyone's kind of in a holding pattern. I think where people are kind of frustrated is they feel that it's held up the free agency process for these teams. And I think where Cam Heyward does say, he's like, hey, I'm tired of the quarterback talk. Let's just move forward. I think that in general, he's like, yeah, the talk is exhausting. But I think that part of where Cam Heyward, and I think that this is where he does echo the Steelers sentiment. I don't think the Steelers are trying to go all out for Aaron Rodgers, because some people are trying to paint the picture that the Steelers are just waiting on hands and knees saying, please, Mr. Rodgers, please pick us, please pick us, please pick us. The Steelers have probably handed Aaron Rodgers a deal that he's like, that doesn't make me want to jump at it. And the Steelers like, don't care. That's the offer. And if you take it, we'll keep you, but we'll bring you in. But if you don't, we got other options. And I think that's what the Steelers are doing right now. And yes, the other options aren't that great either. Justin Fields was probably their primary option. He's not with the team, so now that they're considering this. But to me, I look at this man and I say, like, I think that Cam Heyward kind of knocks it on the head. Like, he doesn't even besmirch Rodgers in this. He's like, look, I'm not doing all that kind of stuff. And he gives him respect. Like, do what you got to do to figure out what your life plan is. Everyone's journey is different, and he respects that. But he's also saying, like, you know what the deal is. There's no need to go on to do nothing crazy, recruit somebody to look like you're chasing after somebody. And I think that's where I'm at with this situation. I think that's where the Steelers are at. I think that a lot of this is being blown up to higher proportions because, the draft is still a month and some change away. And this is more fun to talk about things, and it's getting there. Now, if the Steelers, like, if Art Rooney II flew to a ayahuasca retreat, then I'd be like, okay, then this is a little much. But I think the Steelers are just very much, they've put out an offer. They're waiting to see what he says. If he says yes, they bring him in. They say, all right, this is the deal. But as I've said for a while, Nick, I can't see myself. I can't see the Steelers. I can't see myself understanding the Steelers being willing to put up with Aaron Rodgers not showing up for OTAs, not showing up for mandatory minicamp like he did with the Jets last year. And there needs to be an understanding that he's going to do what he's going to do what's required of him. And I'm not sure if you can ever expect that of him, because he can say one thing and then completely turn and do the opposite the next, because we've seen him do that before. Well,
listen, we've seen him do all that, and I think you and I are probably a little bit fried from talking all about the quarterback situation. This is a week now of Rodgers watch. Like, for us media folk, for everyone scrolling all their social medias, I understand why this gets old. You're basically hearing the same refurbished stuff. Like, it was the same thing when it was the day before the legal tampering period, and all you kept hearing about was the Steelers and Justin Fields are having talks. The Jets are interested. And it was just the same thing on repeat, right? That's all it is, because no one knows when he's going to decide. Listen, the last time Aaron Rodgers decided where he was going to go was a trade scenario, but the last time he decided, it lasted until draft week. So it's not necessarily going to happen anytime soon either. It could happen tomorrow. It could happen the day before the draft. I don't know when it's going to happen. No one knows. And so you're just going to keep seeing the same thing recycled. It's the NFL cycle. It's the fact that he's a quarterback. It's the fact that he's Aaron Rodgers. So all of those things come together. And I agree with you. I mean, listen, man, Aaron Rodgers in this locker room, I think, presents some issues. I think you and I can both agree with that. There's explosive potential there. How he's kind of thrown guys under the bus before, in pressers and things like that. Then there's concerns on the field with the level of play, with what you saw on tape. There are concerns. I understand he ended the season stronger than he started it, but there are concerns with his on-the-field fit with the Steelers too. And so nothing's perfect, but we'll kind of see where this goes. But I think Cam Heyward's just kind of speaking for most people here, where it's a sensible point, but I understand everybody that's like, I'm a little tired of the QB talk. Let's talk about Darius Slay or something. You know what I mean? Like,
which is what we did all y'all last year.
Right. I mean, they signed Darius Slay and trade for DK Metcalf, and the DK Metcalf trade, which is just an absolutely like crazy move that the Steelers never make, got like 12 hours of talk and has barely been talked about. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. So we won't talk about it further. We have we will talk about quarterback, but other quarterbacks that the Steelers could be looking at here. But I'm right with you. The reason I brought this up is because I think things are overblown. And listen, when I wrote that the Post-Gazette story of that, and I tweeted out like, hey, I just want to point an important distinction between how some people are portraying Cam Heyward versus what he actually said. Cam Heyward retweeted it, and I was just like, I think he agrees. So points to him for how he addressed it. I think he handled it the right way, and I think how he's handling it reflects how the organization is handling it. Take that for what you will. We got to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about quarterbacks in this draft class with Nick. He's been looking at them. We'll discuss that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Stick here. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you, this show is brought to you by Game Time. Imagine watching your favorite team live, feeling the energy of the crowd, and witnessing unforgettable moments. There's nothing like experiencing a game in person. Getting tickets shouldn't be stressful. That's where Game Time comes in, because it makes it easier than ever to grab last-minute seats at unbeatable prices. With Game Time Picks, the app does all the work for you. It curates the best deals so that you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. The curated deals make it super simple to find the great tickets at a great price. No more sifting through thousands of options. The seat view feature is a game changer. Before I even hit buy, I can see exactly what my seat looks like in the venue and what my view will be. It's that reassuring. And the best part, you're covered with Game Time's lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal somewhere else, they'll refund you 110% of the difference of the prices. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to deliver on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up. Ready to make your next event even better? Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We're back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Nick Farabaugh of PennLive.com. Nick, let's talk about some quarterbacks in this draft class. Now, we're going to talk a lot about day 3 quarterbacks. But before we do that, I want to explore the potential of the Steelers going with a quarterback in day 1 or 2 of the draft. Because to me, I think the sweet spot for what they're trying to do at quarterback this year, because this is not a really good quarterback draft class, is get one on day 3, get a guy that can be a future backup that maybe if you develop, he can be Mason Rudolph for you. And we'll talk about those guys. But there are some that think the Steelers should jump at quarterback, say Jaxson Dart in the first round. Or if Shedeur Sanders falls to 21 in the first round, which honestly, I think that creates a little bit more of a thinking process if I'm the Steelers. So before we get to Jaxson Dart, I want to ask you, Nick Farabaugh, if Shedeur Sanders falls to 21, the Steelers should what?
I mean, I would think about it. I like Shedeur's game. I understand, everybody, every time everything happens with Shedeur, everyone's like, oh, Dion this. But, like, watch the kid's game. I mean, he's talented. He's got great accuracy. He's very good in terms of the above-the-neck stuff. He runs into pressure, and I don't love the arm talent. I think that's the two things. He's also not really that mobile. I mean, he's got ability to create out of pocket, but it's not great. Like
he's not Justin Fields.
Right. I mean, when we talk about Dart, I think Dart is better outside the pocket at making throws off platform and things like that. So Shedeur has some really interesting qualities. First of all, I don't think this is going to happen. I think he's going to go before them. But if it does happen, I actually would use this scenario as one where I'm thinking about teams at that top of the second, teams like the Browns, teams like the Titans, the Giants, the Raiders, any team that is in there, the Jets, like all these teams that we're thinking of that could use a quarterback that might want to trade up into the first round again, I would use this as a trade back scenario. That's what I would look at it as. And so my first thing would be to field calls and see who wants to call about this. Where's it kind of looking? Shedeur is not one of those guys that I'm like running to the podium for personally. I would think about it, but it's not a blow away pick to me. I think in most normal drafts, he'd probably go around that area. And so we'll see if he gets pushed up, but I would definitely use this as trade bait because you're missing that second round pick. Adding more picks, I think, is a really solid idea.
I'm right with you on that. Okay, so let's move to Jaxson Dart. I am not a Jaxson Dart believer. I get that there's some people that just really love his tape and think that he could be the next guy that just surprises everyone. Am I crazy for not buying in on his tape, Nick, or do you see the same thing I see there?
I'm not a first round Dart guy. I like Dart on the day 2 spectrum, but I'm not a Dart first round believer at all. Okay. I mean, listen, I think his arm's solid. I don't think it's elite. So I don't think the tools are just strikingly elite. I think his above the neck questions are significant. He doesn't really throw with anticipation. He could be a kind of one lock read guy. He comes from an offense where he wasn't asked to go through progressions. Go through his tape and see how many times he has to go 1, 2, 3 and hit a backside dig. Like that is, I think, one of the clearest ways you can say, can this guy process? He just doesn't have, I don't know. Could he do it? When he was asked to, he had some troubles doing it. His accuracy at some points can go a little scattershot. There are things that I don't like. I love his moxie. I love his toughness. I think he's got good ability to create out of structure. I think his deep ball is pretty intriguing. So I think there are things about Dart that I really like, that I like as a starting upside. I understand why people like Dart, but a first round talent, to me, that is pushing the envelope for him. When I was at the Senior Bowl and I thought he was going to be a third round pick, I really liked the idea of Jaxson Dart. But 21 overall, little rich for my blood.
I'm right with you there. And I think if you get to the third round and he's sitting there, that's when I start to contemplate and weighing my options with who else is available. Is there a receiver or a corner that I think is an absolute steal? Then it's weighing that. But to me, Nick, the sweet spot for what the Steelers should do in this draft class comes on day 3 of the draft. If they can get like my ideal, my QB1 for what the value the Steelers should pay for QB1 this year, for their quarterback pick this year, which should not be until at least the 4th round. That guy for me would be Will Howard, because I can see Will Howard easily being there available on day 3 of the draft, being available when they pick in the 4th round and saying, hey, I think that would be a good value. I see Will Howard, what he did for Ohio State. I don't think he's a superstar. I don't think he's a future starter or anything like that, but I think he could be a future Mason Rudolph, which that is worth something, as we see right now. That can give you some insurance, some good backup times. You know, if Mason's with the team the next 2 years and Will Howard's on the roster, and then say they draft a guy next year, Mason could be the bridge backup quarterback. Will Howard could be a future backup quarterback. That's worth something, as we've seen the NFL. Who else? I know there's people that love Tyler Shough. There's people that really love Jalen Milroe. Where do you look at these other quarterbacks and where the Steelers should consider taking them? And if you were to give us a top 3 day 3 quarterback options that you think will be realistically available there, who would they be for you?
Yeah, I mean, those day 2 options, Milroe and Shough, are interesting players. They're toolsy. They're more toolsy. Shough's got the age concerns and the injury concerns. Milroe is just so raw. I mean, he is so raw. But in the 3rd round, I think Milroe is an interesting player. But when you're talking about the 4th round, I like the idea of Will Howard. I'm still not quite sure if Will Howard's in that tier where he'll go in the 3rd round or if he'll fall to the 4th. He's in this weird kind of gray area. Maybe he goes in the 3rd. Maybe he goes in the 4th. We'll see. I like him in round 4. If he's there in round 4, I'd be all over that. I love his deep ball. I think the footwork got cleaner as the year went on. He throws with some anticipation. He's got that upside to be a really nice backup. The guy I really like that I don't think people are going to know as much is Max Brosmer out of Minnesota. Now, listen, the first thing I'm going to tell you is why he's not going to be a big-time draft pick. He is an absolute statue with no ability out of structure whatsoever. So you have that. But if you want to talk about a guy that sees the field well, throws with anticipation, and can make some tight window throws in the middle of the field into the intermediate areas, this guy's got him. He's also a little scatter shot all over kind of the field, but this guy could be had in the 5th or the 6th round. I think he's a really interesting player. If you're going to take a dart throw at a 6th round pick, that's who I would take a shot on. And then the other guy I do like me some Kyle McCord. I think he's an interesting player.
I like him
he's
too.
Volatile and he has high risk decision making, but he's got this ability to throw with anticipation. I know a lot of people in Pittsburgh, if you're a Pitt fan, are going to be probably blinded more at that. But watch the whole season.
The very next week, he was much better too.
Oh my God.
That was such a bad outlier game. If people don't know what we're talking about, I covered that game. He threw 3 pick sixes to Pitt's defense. And it was the first one was like, wow. The second one was like, oh my gosh. The third one's like, well, that's just going to be a touchdown because that's the rule today. But that was also, I think, the last game that Pitt won that season.
Yeah, man. It's unfortunate because I think it'll distort it. But McCord's got, a solid arm. He's tough.
He's a good athlete.
I like McCord a little bit. So those would be my 3 on day 3. I would consider guys like Shough, Milroe, even Quinn Ewers probably in the day 2 category. So Will Howard would be my number 1. We'll see. He's on that little kind of, maybe he's in day 2, maybe he's in day 3. I don't know. We'll see where he goes. But the name to keep an eye on, I think not a lot of people know it. Max Brosmer, keep an eye on it. If there's a guy that's going to emerge out of this class that's, like, how did that guy fall that far? I would imagine it's going to be him because he's going to be a 6th-round pick. I think he's got a shot to outplay that because he has traits, anticipation, the above the next stuff. That stuff's hard to teach. If you have that, you have a nice basis to maybe shock a few people.
I like that. I like Max Brosmer as a guy that could be someone to consider there. But I'm with you on this. I like Kyle McCord as like a round 5 option if he's sitting there. I can see that being a good fit, maybe round 6 if he falls that far. But yeah, I'm a big. I don't think you spoke on Will Howard. What's your Will Howard take?
I did speak on Will Howard. He was my favorite.
Oh, you did. My bad. He's your favorite. That's right. You did say that. My apologies.
Yeah, he's my favorite guy. And I do want to just add one thing. If you think I'm saying any of these guys are probably going to be a starter on day 3, no. So if you say this guy sucks, I kind of know.
Yeah, it's like duh. We're not saying that these guys are the futures of franchises, but this is when you're looking for quarterback talent, you either are finding the next franchise guy or a guy that can help you along the way, kind of like what the Steelers have in Mason Rudolph right now. And that is fine because you need players like that. Even when you have franchise quarterbacks, there's going to be days where your quarterback, look what happened to the Bengals 2 years ago when they lost Joe Burrow, and Jake Browning was able to hold it down for a little bit, but wasn't able to keep him up there. That stuff is important at times, even when you do have the franchise quarterback in place. So there's your quarterbacks. Check out Nick's work at Penn Live as we continue that. But we got to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk more about this team, and I want to talk about defensive backs communications because the Steelers have added 2 big veteran names to the safety. Well, 2.5 if you consider Brandin Echols. We'll talk about those additions and whether that can improve also with a new secondary coach. That's next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Nick Farabaugh, stick with us. We'll be right back.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Nick Farabaugh of PennLive.com. Nick, let's talk about defensive backs. Now, in the free agency, the Steelers have signed Darius Slay. They've signed Brandin Echols. And now they've signed Juan Thornhill. So 3 veteran defensive backs being added to the room. One presumably going to start outside cornerback. Darius Slay, you don't pay him $10 million to not start. Echols going to compete, I think, in the slot. Seems a lot like where he'll be fitting there. Juan Thornhill kind of taking on the DeMonte KZ role, where he's the top option for safety off the bench for the Steelers. We'll see what happens with Ryan Watts or anything like that. But the question that I have for you, Nick, is we talked a lot last year, especially towards the tail end of last season, where just communication breakdowns kept happening for the Steelers. Is that something that you think that with the additions they've made there and with the switch back to Gerard Alexander being the new DB's coach, is there enough there to say that this team could be a better, more put together secondary than they were last year when it comes to that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I wouldn't leave out the fact that they're also bringing a new linebackers coach. Obviously, that's a huge communication hub.
Yes, it is.
So Scott McCurley coming in for Aaron Curry is something as well. Listen, they did have veterans that blew coverages last year. I mean, Cam Sutton, veteran. Dante Jackson, veteran. KZ, veteran, right? So the vets blew the coverages. It wasn't young guys.
But all three of those guys you brought up, though,
yeah, they're gone.
They're gone.
And so are the coaches. So you would hope so. I guess that's my answer. You would hope so. Slay's been here, done that. He's an all-pro corner, one of the best corners of his generation. Obviously very good with the communication aspects of it. Thornhill's been around for about 6 years now. Echols, same, about 4 or 5 years. So these guys have been around. I really would hope so. And I think you kind of look at that and you say the staff changes. I know Gerard Alexander is so huge on communication. That's like his big thing. Like he's a big basics guy too, just like Mike Tomlin, right? The routine things routinely. Gerard Alexander is going to drill that home. I imagine, Chris, when we go to OTAs and mandatory minicamp this summer, we're going to see him just drilling communication drills drills the entire time. That's the stuff that he does. That's the stuff that the Steelers want to fix. And so basics are down. So I imagine they will probably fix that. It is something that they are really going to look at. I also think that adding a guy like Darius Slay, who is such a veteran, who has been there, who has always been around football, he's going to be able to digest things even easier for guys that maybe are struggling, right? If Beanie Bishop, for example, in the slot, a second-year guy, is maybe taking a little bit of time to get with it. They'll be able to kind of really deconstruct this fairly quickly. And so I do think it's going to be at least promising to fix these. We'll have to see it, but I think because of the changes, both in the secondary and the staff, it makes sense that it would be fixed.
Yeah, I think that this should be an emphasis of the Steelers, is that, you know, the two position coaches that were responsible the most for communication between the groups that, you know, work there, they're gone. And whether or not they were the biggest reason for that, you know, that shows that the Steelers are, you know, that they are making changes there. And now again, like you said, and here's the other aspect of this. You brought up those three names that are gone here. I think tell me where if you disagree with me on any of these. I think this year, a Darius Slay is going to be better than what Dante Jackson was last year. I think Juan Thornhill, I think he could be better than what DeMonte KZ was last year. Brandin Echols, I think I can tell you, I haven't studied 2 seconds of Brandin Echols, but I think as long as he is just not objectively terrible, he will be better than what Cam Sutton was last year, because Cam Sutton was just woo, that was a falling off of a cliff. But like, if he reaches the bare minimum, and Slay shows me what I saw on tape from last year with the Eagles, which is not he doesn't have his 4.3 speed anymore, but he does have the veteran savvy, and he knows how to play a lot of situations, and he gives you really good play. He also had 16 pass breakups last year, ridiculous number. And then you get Juan Thornhill, who could be a much better deep safety option coming off the bench or adding to your third safety rotation plan. I think that this group can be that, but again, like you said, there's other pieces that have to be in play as well.
Yeah, I mean, you know, okay, I'll play devil's advocate here.
There we go.
Slay concern is he's 34. What if he falls off a cliff? I mean, he'd have to fall off. No offense to Dante Jackson, Levi Wallace, and Patrick Peterson. He would have to fall off the largest cliff to not be better than what the Steelers got out of the corner position for the past 3 seasons. It has been really rough for them. And so while it's a patchwork, Slay was really good. Now he's switching from a primary zone scheme to a more heavy man scheme, which I think is a question for a 34-year-old corner. He was really good last year. Even in man coverage situations, he was really good last year.
He was.
And because he had 16 pass deflections, he had 0 picks. You imagine some of those are going to come. Like luck is going to come back his way. There should be interception upside there. With Thornhill, you know, he's been hurt a lot. He's been having these nagging calf injuries, but he's a really good open field tackler. He's a single high guy. His time with Kansas City, which is way more similar to what the Steelers run than what Cleveland ran, was really good. So he should have a nice transition there. And then Echols, I don't know what to make of Brandin Echols, Chris. He's kind of a wide body. Like, he looks like a boundary corner to me. Even though he's played in the slot, he looks like a boundary corner. So maybe the question is Beanie going to be better than Cam Sutton? And I also believe that would be true, because I thought Beanie was better than Cam Sutton this year.
I thought he was. We're on the same page.
Yes. So, or maybe they draft a slot. Who knows what happens with the slot corner? But either way, yes, I think they upgraded the secondary. And I think they should be better at most things. They should be better at man coverage. They should be better in communication. They should be better tackling. They should be better at all these things. And so this should be a better defense overall. I think, period. When the secondary gets better, and you're probably going to infuse this defensive line with a first-round draft pick or at least an early draft pick, you should probably be better defensively than you were last year personnel-wise. Now, I don't want to get into the schematic parts of this. That needs its whole own little
That's
tangent.
a whole other conversation.
But personnel-wise, they are better.
All right. Well, there you have it. Some optimism there in these trying times with covering the Pittsburgh Steelers. But hey, we try to bring that here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. He's Nick Farabaugh. Nick, thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at FarabaughFB. Follow me on Blue Sky at Nick Farabaugh. And make sure to read the stuff over at PennLive.com. We got the YouTube channel, The Steelers Blitz, as well. Make sure to check it out.
Absolutely, Nick. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you all for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, all the social medias at Carter Critiques, same handle everywhere. Read my work in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, including my write-up of what Cam Heyward said about the Aaron Rodgers situation and some other things in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette by going to post-gazette.com. And find me here every day, Monday through Friday, breaking down the Pittsburgh Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.